My name is Aaliyah Iqbal. I work with WTS Energy. I'm an electrical power systems engineer and work in the commercial and renewable energy department. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arrumm. I work with Bowmans. Bowmans is a Pan-African law firm. I sit in the projects, energy and infrastructure team. Nice to meet you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Banda. I'm a technical advisor at GIZ. GIZ is a German development corporation. Nice to be here.
Good afternoon. My name is Mungai Kihara. I work at Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority and the Renewable Energy Department. Thank you.
And thank you all. We'll start there actually. Let Kihara keep them.
I didn't want to start. Thank you.
You're sitting close to me thinking you'll be last. So Kihara, we've seen a lot of growth on the CNI side. We understand that the grid has its challenges in terms of ancillary services. From your point of view, what do you think? First of all, what are the ancillary services that are required on this grid, and how can CNI installations support this, in your view?
Thank you, George, and thank you for having me here this afternoon. Of course, as you was mentioned, we have seen a lot of changes from conventional grid that we have had, especially now that we're having variable renewable energy, especially coming from solar and wind, being integrated in the system. That means we cannot continue operating the system the traditional way. And you find that now these of frequency control, these of voltages, are some of the ancillary services that are really required. Noting that traditionally we had the spinning big generators that were able to support the grid, including inertia. But now we're having this system like solar and such that do not have inertia. So they also being intermittent. That means not only the load is changing, but also the generation is changing. So that this becomes really a challenge. So the issue of frequency restoration, frequency containment, and voltages, it becomes very important for the grid. And now the other question is, how do a CNI come in and really assist? This is a tricky one, especially because CNI may not really directly be able to assist. But and looking at a captive power plant, it may not be connected to the grid. But the moment it's connected to the grid now, we are talking another framework altogether. That means where they are connected, they are supposed really to support the voltages on the bus where they are connected to. That's one. And also see how they can be able to support the frequency control of where they are supported. So the issue now getting them connected is also important, and then make sure we have the grid code and they follow the grid code that we have. Thank you.
A big part of that would be trying to figure out how you then compensate for that. And now moving to Sandra, I know we've been working on an ancillary services market study. How far is that going? How is it? What are the things that are coming up from that study?
Good. Thank you, George, for that. Yes, as Jay said, we are supporting the study of the ancillary requirements in Kenya. This is a phase 2 study. So the phase 1, which was also conducted by EPRA and we supported as GIZ, was just to look at the overall ancillary market in Kenya. And so there were 2 main gaps that were identified in that study. One is what you've mentioned, the pricing, there was no tariff. And 2, also, the ancillary the capacity hasn't well been modeled. The capacity requirement for ancillary service hasn't been modeled. And so now in October last year, the study was launched. And so, and it'll run till the end of October this year. And so, the study, which has been split in 4 main work packages, will look at the capacity needs for ancillary in the market. It will develop a pricing signal, meaning the tariffs based on what the requirements will be. We will also do capacity building, just to ensure capacity building for system operators and the planning team to be able to develop a database for ancillary support and also for pricing. So currently, right now, having the study started in October, currently we're doing the situational analysis. So the consultants have come into the country and they've sampled couple of power plants, including all the 7 hydros for Kengen. They've sampled 5 of the Kengen geothermals. That's all Carrier 1. Both of them all Carrier 2, 4, and 5. And the Kengen HFO plant, the wind, and also 4 IPPs. So just looking at the entire scope. So looking at IPP plants, and also now looking at the Kengen plants, and looking at their ability, as Engineer Kihara has mentioned, to handle frequency control, voltage control, black start, and transmission capacity. So that will be the scope of the study. So we anticipate that the results will inform pricing and also hopefully incentivize the C&I market to get into the ancillary market. So that's where I would say we're still in the initial phases, but what has been highlighted so far, interesting. The capacity, some plants have the capacity to do it, but the pricing will determine, yes, but there's also a lot of technical challenges that are coming up from the baseline study. And so we're currently in the process of analyzing the data and seeing what more is needed in these plants to be able to provide the needed capacity for ancillary. Yeah.
And let me just ask a follow-up to that. Is it envisioned that you'll actually have like a standalone sort of market where I could come and build whatever facility that provides that ancillary service? Or is it more looking at the already installed generation capacity?
Yeah, so what we envision with the study is the pricing will be done based on the current market and also the future market that you're referencing. And with the future market, we anticipate the electricity markets will be in, and there'll be the balancing markets that will handle the ancillary for that. So for now, what we're looking at is what are the current ancillary service providers? What kind of contractual agreements do they have? Because currently what we see, it will be more bilateral. The current agreements are more bilateral. And so in the future now, once the balancing markets are in, we're seeing it open up, as you mentioned, to more players coming in and providing ancillary service, and of course being guided by the pricing mechanisms that will be recommended. Yeah.
Maybe now I want to just switch slightly to Aaliyah. Now thinking from the customer point of view, what is the role of I know WTS have been doing some sort of thought around bundling industrial loads and then using those to provide grid services, more like the demand side of it, providing ancillary services to the grid. Maybe you could tell us more about that and what's your thinking around that in Kenya?
Thank you, George. I think for WTS Energy, we are in the private sector, so we usually play a key role in acting as aggregators and integrators. So pulling together like the industrial loads, the energy storage and distribution, and coming together in the various economic zones. So I believe our strengths lie in our technical know-how and in our footprint here in Africa, and our strategic partnerships with the IPPs and the industries. So we're leveraging digital platforms, real-time data, and just seeing how we can provide a bundled portfolio to the grid. So from frequency support to black start capabilities that Sandra had mentioned. So I think for all this to work, we need a sort of new intermediary other than the utilities and the IPPs. So looking at energy orchestrator, such as WTS Energy. We already work with companies, and then the private sector works with industries that, are working in microgrids, are working with battery storage and hybrid systems, so to see how we can actually elevate this and make it our new normal. Thank you. You introduced a new term, the energy.
It's an aggregator.
Orchestrator. Orchestrators, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just define what's an energy orchestrator?
I believe what I think an energy orchestrator is someone or like an entity that comes together and offers these services from sort of like a middleman between the IPP and the consumers. So coming together and seeing how we can work together and, support the grid and stabilize it. Yes.
So like a trader?
Yes.
Okay. Nick, coming to you now, you from the OEM point of view, what equipment is available in the market? What can we saw your presentation yesterday. It was really nice, by the way. Of all what you presented, what does Huawei have that can help us to kind of support this ancillary services market in Kenya?
All right, thank you. So based on the conversation that we've had so far, like what Sandra was saying about the studies, and she mentioned the hydro plants and the geothermal plants, those are utility scale, and those are, well, there's not solar. They are renewable, but it's not wind or solar. And typically, wind and solar has not been able to provide ancillary services. There's many reasons for that. But Huawei is one of the leaders providing this new grid forming technology. So now, it's a very recent, in the last 1 to 2 years, that now Huawei and a few other manufacturers have the power electronics that can provide the ancillary services. They can provide synthetic inertia, mimicking the inertia of the turbines. And therefore, that is frequency support, voltage support. Our black start capabilities are far in advance of other ESS. And we also have fault ride-through. And this one is important because typically, renewable energy, the wind and solar, when there's a short circuit on the grid, it demands a huge short circuit current. And typically the power electronics will disconnect from the grid to protect them and prevent a fire. So that's good, except that now you've lost a huge source of generation and it creates instability on the grid. So another advance in the technology is the fault ride-through, that we can provide the short circuit current, we don't disconnect, and therefore we help the grid return to stable state operation. So all of this is very possible, and Huawei has demonstrated this. We have several sites around the world, and I know that in the UK and in Australia, they've also gone forward with other equipment. What's preventing the C&I sector from really getting involved, I believe it's the fact that we cannot export to the grid. The utility plants, of course, are connected to the grid and they're able to provide these services. So for the C&I sector to get involved, the technology is there. It has to do with the PCS mainly. We can provide these services, and we do this. Sweden is a very good example where there's a very robust ancillary service market. And as you alluded to, they can simply purchase some batteries and set up the services. And there's a robust pricing system for that already in place. Of course, what happens first is that they can feed into the grid. So that is what is preventing C&I from getting involved. But the technology is there at utility scale and C&I scale, and it's been proven. There's many examples. It's not just a concept. We have real life examples. And so, yeah, the technology is not the barrier. I think for C&I to get involved, it's about the feed-in tariff. And the grid forming technology I've just spoken of is very, very new. We still need to make more noise to the regulators, the Ministry of Energy, and KPLC, KenGen, KETRACO, just to really convince them so that they can start making plans, not only for, as Sandra said, with the hydro and geothermal, but we can get the ancillary services from the solar and wind as well. Traditionally, solar equipment is grid following. That means when the grid following just matches the grid. So if there's fluctuation in the grid, it can match it. And if the grid becomes very unstable, it can disconnect to protect itself. So, and we call this a current source because it matches the voltage and it provides the current. So grid forming is changing to a voltage source. We can output the correct voltage to provide support to the grid. So if the grid is unstable, instead of following it and potentially disconnecting, we can inject active power, reactive power to provide support. So we can help to form the grid rather than follow the grid.
I think the opportunities that it presents are quite vast. Just firstly, in terms of what I think the whole panel has spoken about in terms of providing some form of grid stability, particularly as as a country, we are more renewable energy focused, especially with the variable energy technologies coming in. It's helpful to hear that solar and wind can actually come in and be part of this ancillary services with some of these technologies. So I think that's what we will be looking at. I think there's an opportunity for providing grid stability in terms of the ancillary services which can be provided, the black start and so on. Coupled with that, it also provides some form of energy efficiency just tied to that. Especially in remote areas, it's an opportunity to expand the energy access, which we hear government always talking about. Also, for CNI players, it presents an opportunity for additional revenue streams. Most CNI players are slightly tied to one off-taker, as it tends to be the case. So the opportunity for these ancillary services creates a new revenue stream for them to be able to tap into the market. In terms of risks, I think the key one still remains the regulatory uncertainty, which I think has been alluded to in terms of what's needed is a tariff. I think the Energy Act touches slightly on ancillary services, but it does not go too deep into it. I think we need, in terms of what will be required, we would need to look at having express or explicit definitions around what an ancillary service is, what would constitute an ancillary service, what type of market mechanisms will be there, how do we procure these services, how do we get them on board, what are the compensation mechanics around them, is it an availability payment, is it an on-demand payment? Basically, those are the type of items which I think will need to come in from a regulatory perspective, just to fill in that gap and have the industry grow.
What sort of costs are we looking at, or what have you seen in terms of equipment, in terms of tariff? If there are any numbers we could kind of borrow from other jurisdictions.
Well, it's very hard to just give numbers because it's really project based. The first important thing is to do grid studies because some of this is very location related. So there's certain locations that would perhaps decrease the cost, increase the benefits, while other locations would do the opposite. So yeah, I can tell you it is more expensive than a simple ESS. These features do come with a cost and you have to do some kind of oversizing. You can't just do the minimum that you might with, if you weren't focused on the ancillary services. So that is definitely going to be an obstacle because, everything is cost sensitive and this is not the cheapest options. So financing is something that will be a big enabler. And this is actually a barrier around the world, even in mature markets like Europe. Because as we've alluded to, it's quite difficult to do the pricing for these services. I don't think there's a consensus yet on the best way. I think the most common way right now is for capacity or availability of these ancillary services, not per unit of anything, but just having the capacity available. So yeah, the cost is not cheap and financing will be important. And the more we can get accurate pricing is going to help all of this as well.
And maybe just talking about numbers and Kihara, back to you again. We've seen draft regulations that say that, captive power installers should be charged for the sort of ancillary services the grid is providing for them in terms of standby capacity, especially the consumer. If you have your own solar, it's kind of like you're using the grid as a standby, yeah? And then you levy a fee for that standby. But my members are telling me, shouldn't it be also quid pro quo, as in I am also providing some sort of service for you by not loading you with that demand? Should I also be compensated for that? So where are we going with this arrangement on grid support services and captive power plants that are already installed?
George, if utilities here, Kenya Power will say, I'm losing demand, I'm losing my customers, so you're making me lose some revenues. But as you put it, it's correctly that as a captive power plant, which is grid connected, you will need the grid as a reference point for synchronizing your power plant. So when the grid is not there, you will not really be able to really operate optimally your plant. We're also looking at, for example, the balancing between where your power plant is a solar power plant, balancing the variability coming from your power plant. We're also looking, for example, let me say, where we have a spinning one, sugar factories where they use steam and they're able to get a spinning generator. You see balancing between their load and their generator. Sometimes they will need also the grid. And these are things that we are saying, this balancing, you are taking some service from the grid. Currently, they are not really being compensated. And you see, they put a lot of strain to the grid connected power plants. For example, the hydros by Kengen and maybe some geothermal power plants. So this strain is an added cost on A&M on these power plants. And with that, then you may see why we are coming in that aspect that we really need to compensate. But you see, it's also the other way if we work it this way. And as Nick has mentioned, we have a form inverter, and you're also providing the services. So you say, you did to me, and then I do to you. So it's a two-way prong that it can happen. That if we're able to do this, then we'll be able to do. So what we are working with GSZ on ancillary services is really enlightening the regulator and the government on how best we can be able to do it, so that now it doesn't really look at that we are really favoring the utility, but it's really putting an economy that benefits everyone within that market. Thank you.
I think when it comes to the retrofitting aspect, it's more looking at the software, not the hardware. When I say the software, I'm meaning that we already have like the diesel gensets, the solar PVs, and we're actually more CNI companies actually, spending more investment in the battery storage. So when I talk about retrofitting, I'm looking at more of upgrading the controls, upgrading the softwares, upgrading the interfaces, and I think that's where Nick and Huawei and the different manufacturers come in, creating solutions that can actually allow for the grid support. Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, there's business there for you. You don't seem to be smiling.
Yeah, the software is important, but there is some hardware that's important also. So I think it depends site to site.
Okay. Yeah, I'm tempted to tell you to give me more details, but let me just follow through first on Sandra. And again, coming back to my follow-up question from the first round of questions, there are many ways to do this ancillary services market. If you just rely on the market, the balancing market to do it, some guy installing his and then being able to supply, or you kind of tell anyone who wants a PPA to already have pre-installed all that within their system. As we continue to do this design, what sort of approach do you foresee for the Kenyan market?
Just to borrow from what Nick has just mentioned, yes, there is the hardware component of it. Like then we could see continuity in planning, say how we are bringing on board this new C&I plants, if it's the new solar plants with the grid, forming inverters, and then also BESS, because BESS has been known to solve most of the, like, for example, the Kenyan market, some of the issues that we're looking to solve with ancillary frequency control voltage, BESS can handle that. So it's looking at continuity in planning and implementation, and looking at also starting from where we are. If it's the current market where we're handling bilateral agreements, can also those bilateral agreements continue into the future markets? So ensuring that we are also ready for that transition. So first of all, a phased approach will be necessary. I like what we adopted, or rather what the regulator adopted with net metering, first having an eligibility criteria. I know for ancillary would be hard, but coming up with something like that, that will be able to say, okay, we are first going to allow this capacity to come in. We see how it reacts in the market, or we're going to work with this tariff. If we're going to base it, of course, as Nick has mentioned, that it's very hard to put a number on it. It depends truly on capacity and availability. And that's also what the study is seeking to address. What is the demand for ancillary service in the country? And that is what will inform the pricing. So based on that as well, it could be a pricing mechanism that's favorable for the market, but I know maybe some players may or may not be happy with the pricing, but it should be a start. So it's that phased approach that I see would be the best for us, and agreeing, of course, once the markets are open, it means different technologies, different players coming in. I don't think we should put a barrier on that. We should open it up. But then now we should try to find areas where we can put a phased approach in it, whether it's through the tariffs, whether it's through the capacity, or whether we are going to first allow the utility projects first to explore how much ancillary they can provide before we put in the C&I players. Yeah, that's what I believe would be approach.
Okay. I think sounds like it's still a bit open.
It is. But we're hoping the study will be able to point us in a direction.
When do we expect to see this study? On the private sector side?
On the private, end of this year. End of this year for sure. If it's not come to Kevin.
Thank you. My final question goes to you, Matthew. Having discussed all we've discussed, and you knowing our laws, our Energy Act, our regulations, what are these things that we will need to adjust, especially on the Energy Act, to accommodate for this, if any?
So I think the first one will definitely just, like I mentioned earlier, being very explicit about what the ancillary services are under the Energy Act, and what services can be provided, by whom can they be provided, what the licensing process would be for ancillary services. At the moment, it's very, I don't know if I should call it vague, or it gives room for us lawyers to have multiple interpretations, which of course it's fun for us, but not so much fun for our clients. So I think just having that certainty around those terminologies, how to get into the market, what will be the procurement procedure around it, like she's mentioned, do we wait for the existing utility players first and explore, or can anyone just come in? What exactly will be the requirements for participation? What's the scope and responsibility of the parties, of a licensee, of the system operator? I think just being explicit about those provisions will help give so much certainty to this market and help it grow at such a good level. I think also I'd talk about maybe pricing around it, trying to understand what the tariff will be. At least the the Energy Act already provides some guidance in terms of EPRA considering a just and reasonable tariff. I don't know what will be just and reasonable in an ancillary service context, but those are the things that we need to provide for.
Thank you. Kihara, do you want to tell us what is just and reasonable?
I know I like the way he has mentioned that we need to be explicit on what are these ancillary services are. Of course, the Act, being a lawyer and having worked maybe in this sector for some time, we cannot be very detailed on the Act itself. So what we have tried to do is be a little bit detailed in the draft energy policy 2025, and especially because in the other policy there was not much on ancillary services, or what we call reliability services. And you have seen that moving forward, and the government intends to continue having more and more renewable energy, not only in the grid, but also what is happening in the CNI and also mini grids, then we really need to find a way to make sure we still have the security of supply that we really required in our power system. So we have tried to address that in the energy policy, and I will call upon my audience also to check on it. They may also let us know, we missed this one, and it's so good to see what we can do and work together. Thank you.
So the window on the policy is still open for people to give more comments?
Not really, because on Monday we had the validation workshop, and the timelines are not on our side. Actually, it is in the minister's performance contract with the president that we have to deliver the policy by June this year. So we had the validation last week. We are in the process of now having it through the cabinet to the cabinet. Yeah.
Most of us in the industry know very little about ancillary services and all that. So how do we now work towards building that technical capacity or commercial capacity when it comes to ancillaries, or legal capacity? So more on the skill development side, on how we actually support this market. What are your ideas on how we can do that?
I think I'd look at it in 4 key areas. I'll look at capacity building, the regulatory market, and market signals. I think this is what we've all been speaking about, trying to get there, trying to define the metering standards, trying to define what are the compensation like from the study that Sandra is saying. I hope after that we'll be able to, have an idea of how that would look like. I think also the second one would be technical enablement. I think this is where the manufacturers come in the sense of, upgrading with smart inverters, the energy management systems, and real-time communication in response to the grid and the grid signals. I think the third one would look at the operational coordination, like manpower, the control rooms. How can we be able to have all these things work efficiently and dispatch the resources across multiple sites, which is critical. I think the last one is now capacity building when it comes to the teams. What are we doing both within the utilities and the private sector when it comes to marketing operations, when it comes to forecasting. So those are the 4 areas I think we can look into when it comes to building the capacity. Yeah.
My name is Edwin Choroge, and from ESAK, and my question would be directed to my friend Kihara, unfortunately. It's really just about the whole issue of the system operator, which has been going on for some time. Even today, we are really not too sure where it sits, whether with KETRAC or how independent, because we were really looking for an ISO, an independent systems operator, who would be dealing with these things as far as the system stability is concerned. And my second question to you is on the issue of the outages that we have had, the blackouts that we have had, and whether all the time we are told it is going to be investigated. Obviously, we never get to know exactly what happened. And we're just wondering whether in your you have found that ancillaries could be contributing to some of those blackouts that we have had. Apart from the monkeys, you remember there was a time we were told there was a monkey which touched something. Yeah.
But very true. On the system operator, let me start with the system operator. You are aware from the Act itself, it says we should have. By the way, it doesn't say independent. It talks about a system operator away from the entity that is in the business of buying and selling electricity. So in I had not joined EPRA that time, in 22 December, we had the authority designating KETRAC as a system operator. But designation is the starting point. Of course, we have to start somewhere. But there's a lot of work need to be done, including the manpower that currently Kenya Power have, and see how do you transition them now be with Ketaco. That's one, and also the hardware and the software part of it. We got support of AFD, and I know you're aware that Ketaco is building a totally new control center for that. So there's quite a lot being done in the background, including now the issue of staffing. Definitely, even if it was you and you have your children and they want to get married and start their own house, you still get resistance. Yeah, I agree you should go, but I want to still remain here. So it's that push and pull that is having that, but it's being worked on. On outages, I don't think any outage that we have is similar to the other one. It comes different from the other. Of course, there's the other one that there was a blame on Lake Turkana, but Turkana also came and said not really. But I think the main ones, and I remember because I was involved there, the other one on 23 December. Our constraints, the grid is the major one, where now this overloading of the lines, they cannot take in more than they trip, and that time they are carrying a lot of power and then make other lines also trip. But I get to a point that maybe we need to be a little bit transparent and maybe share some of these investigations on where they are coming from. Yeah, thank you.
I would like my question to be directed to Engineer Kihara. Engineer, taking into account that the provision of these services is the backbone of any power system, what is EPLA doing to ensure that all the people who come into that particular system provide the necessary services to support the grid? Because if you continue doing it the way you are doing it now, national blackouts might be the order of the day, which will be very sad. And yet, you as a regulator must ensure that anybody coming to the system has got the ability to provide some of these particular services, if not all. For example, I know for IPPs, we were required to make sure that we have got a black start facility, okay? To ensure that we can, if the system goes off, we can, as individual generators, be able to provide that service. What are you doing about the other generators, especially the ones in the other areas?
Very true, Engineer. If we don't work on it, the blackouts will be a nod of the day. And I think you are aware that the Minister of Energy has proclaimed that these variable renewable energy power plants really need to come with a battery storage or some form of storage, so that now they'll be able to have grid stable and especially stabilize the power coming from their side. The proclamation and the policy coming from the ministry, it's now us as a regulator to make sure it's really followed. So now future PPAs that are coming to EPRA for approval, then that's one thing that we'll be checking on. So that's how we are looking at it, that the government has proclaimed itself, and us as the regulator now, we implement the policy being promoted by the government. Thank you.
Just a follow-up question. That policy of the ministry, what is it going to do to the cost of electricity from the renewable sources, especially the intermittent renewable sources? Do you see any significant change in tariffs from that particular policy? And is the ministry prepared to pay that sort of amount that will come out of that? Or is it been given as a policy without very serious thought about the effects of the tariff increases? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very true. Of course, there's an added capex to the whole plant. That means the person putting the capex expects some return on the investment that they have done. But ministry, I don't think ministry is looking at it as that they'll give a tariff for, like we have done on a feeding tariff, where ministry used to come up with the tariffs for this. For solar and wind, moving forward is have renewable energy auctions. So we expect that now the the tariffs or the prices will be determined by the market. When you have the competition, then you'll be able to determine the price that's coming out of it. But of course, it's expected that it cannot be really the same. But we also looking at we take advantage of what is happening over the world and the prices coming down, and also bringing about now the auction and expecting that will also help us to get I don't say it's a lower tariff, but a competitive tariff from it. Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here this morning, and also for ESAK organizing this conference. As the government pushes for more and more renewable energies, not only for the grid but also CNI, and the use of ancillary services, of course, becomes very important, both for the grid and the CNI customers. So this is a good conversation, and I think we cannot really stop here. We can always continue having it as we finalize on the study that we are doing to the GIZ, and to see what the compensation mechanisms and all the pricing, all that comes on board. So thank you very much.
Just following from also the panel that I was in yesterday, there is opportunity. The market is going to open up. The electricity market is opening up, and it is opening up whether it's through the net metering, the open access regulations, and now we have ancillary. So what I'm excited about, or my key takeaway, is there's so much for the C&I to now plug in. We've had right now we're at, is it 500? No, 200. The statistic of how much capacity, over 500, right? And
600.
600, exactly. And that has been built over the years. And so with the opening up of the markets and the investment opportunities, particularly that we're trying to see, because there's always a conversation of how do we grow our industries. I think, even the ancillary service or the ancillary market is also providing an opportunity for other players like Huawei to come in and have more robust technology into our markets. I guess soon we won't just be flossing about a grid that's mostly renewable. I'm hoping now we'll get into a grid that's renewable and efficient, supported by an efficient captive market as well, or captive C&I market. Yeah.
So first, thank you. I'm grateful to be part of this panel. I think the opportunities which I've learned about from here seem quite vast. It's nice to hear government talking in a very proactive manner and very optimistic manner. So we'll be looking forward to many things from the government side, from the policy side as well, and from the regulatory side. We hope we can plug in the gaps relatively soon as this market expands and grows. And please get a good lawyer as you expand with the market.
Firstly, I'm grateful for being here and being part of this panel. I think what I'd like to say is that captive power and ancillary services are now more of a strategy, looking from it from a strategic lens. I think now as we shift from like self-supply to system support, I believe the industry players have a big role to play in grid stability and resilience. So from the private sector, I believe it's time for the private sector to come together and to be proactive, as the grid and the future of the grid, I believe, is in the private sector's hands. And it's good to see that now that the challenge that we are facing is now unlocking the technical, regulatory, and financial levers that are able to make this thing viable. And it's good that in each of everyone who's spoken in this panel, there is like a way, or everyone is trying to do what they can to actually unlock these levers. So it's good to see, and I'm excited to see what the future of ancillary services holds in the CNI sector. Thank you.
All right. Yes. First of all, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for ESAK. This has been a very interesting panel, and I think it's very good. We had quite a diverse panel from different sectors. And my takeaway would just be that this is evolving very, very quickly. And I'm optimistic from what I've heard, but I think we still need to continue to challenge our assumptions because, like I said, it's evolving so quickly that sometimes what wasn't possible 2 or 3 years ago can be possible. And of course, progress takes time. So maybe we can see some action, like with Sandra's study, and then EPRA will have to respond, and this can take 2 years or 3 years. So we don't want to be using 2 or 3 year old assumptions, because when we get to implement, we'll be 5 or 6 years old. So I would just suggest that we all, without judgment, we need to really look at the latest examples and continue to stay updated, because it evolves so quickly. It's easy to get left behind, and change takes time. So Kenya has an opportunity to really do something, great and ahead of the problems. So I think it's important that we just look at it from that angle as well.
Actually, on my end, my closing remark would be on my request, actually, to the government and the study, is that in the end, give us an opportunity to be able to do whatever we can to trade in ancillary services. Don't limit it to just what the existing plants can do. Don't limit it to what the existing technology can do. Create a platform where you can actually just innovate and provide whatever service. Define the problem we have, and then don't be very prescriptive on the solution. Let people visit Huawei and see what's there, and come up with a solution that allows George to build something in Suswa to stop that national blackout and get paid for it. Yeah. Simply put, I would say come at it from a very open-minded point of view, not from a point of view of what is already existing and protecting what is existing. Thank you. That's the end of our panel. I think they deserve a round of applause. We'll stand and have some photos, and then we will then conclude close for lunch. After lunch, we'll then go back to